Newton is a hotbed of political activity. The general election right around the corner on November 6th, and there is a lot at stake. From president to state rep, Newton voters will impact the general elections. Hear how with Shawn Fitzgibbons, co-chair of the Newton Democratic City Committee, and Tom Mountain, chair of the Newton Republican City Committee, next on Newton Newsmakers.
Newton Newsmakers is made possible through the volunteer production efforts of the employees of mass media and big city publishing, and through the support of Newton residents like you.
Hi, and welcome to Newton Newsmakers, proud to be voted the top local political program in the entire Northeast by the Alliance for Community Media. We have a lot to talk about with our guest today. Shawn Fitzgibbons is the co-chair of the Newton Democratic City Committee, title he shares with Martina Jackson. And Tom Mountain is here with us as well. Tom is the chair of the Newton Republican City Committee. First of all, thank you. It's a busy election season. Both of you with the various committees, the two different committees in the city of Newton are, I would assume, exceptionally busy right now. So we have four races that actually have a Democrat as well as a Republican: Obama-Romney, Brown-Warren, Bellat-Kennedy, and Kahn-Swiston. So first, why don't we turn to Tom. Which of those races do you feel are the most competitive?
We're not taking anything for granted. Obviously, you started with the Obama-Romney campaign. Now, it's been said that that this state will go strictly Democratic. Idealistically, I'm not one to believe that because Romney did win the state as governor some years ago, and he was elected by a majority of the citizens here. So. But I will, shall we say, accede to the wishes of the Romney campaign and dispense with campaigning effectively here in the state. However, I would also say that Romney will take New Hampshire, and I'll even go out on a limb and say that he'll probably take Maine as well. We have a Tea Party governor who's running, Tea Party's governor who's running for senator, I believe, up there, and you also have a similar situation in New Hampshire. And I would even go on a limb and to say that he may actually take Rhode Island as well because of the big unemployment there. Now, what are we doing specifically as a state and city committee? We will not be focusing on Massachusetts for the Romney campaign. We're heading up to New Hampshire, southern New Hampshire mostly, whichever is closest, whichever is most convenient for people, or wherever we're needed.
So you're the co-chair of the Democratic City Committee. Do you also believe that it makes sense to put the focus onto New Hampshire and to the other places that Tom's talking about, or do you believe that the Democrats really need to sink resources into Massachusetts?
Excellent question. I think that New Hampshire is really important. I always look back to 2000 election. If the Democrats had won New Hampshire, it was just several thousand votes that we lost. I think the course of history would have been significantly different with Al Gore as president. So it's definitely something that we really are focused on. There's actually a really impressive Obama campaign organization in Massachusetts that's dedicated to two things. One, mobilizing volunteers to do work in New Hampshire and also other parts of the country, actually, and also fundraising. This is an important state for the Democrats and for Obama because our own fundraising depends on grassroots donors. We don't count on just a small number of wealthy individuals to pour money into our effort. It's grassroots donations which keep us going. And there's a lot of support for the president here in Massachusetts. You know, the vote isn't as exciting because we know he'll win. But from a fundraising standpoint, it's really important.
Let me jump to the Joe Kennedy and Shawn Bellat race. I think that's one of the most interesting from a Newton perspective. And the reason why I say that, and please chime in if you think I'm right or wrong or what have you, is because 2 years ago, and I realize the district has changed dramatically, 300,000 new voters across a whole series of new communities. But 2 years ago when Shawn Bellat ran against Barney Frank, he won essentially almost every community with the exception of Newton, Brookline, and I'm not sure if Wellesley, I don't remember that one or not. But Barney Frank got reelected because of Newton and Brookline's voter turnout. Is that a fair statement from a Democratic perspective to say that?
I think Barney Frank got reelected because he was a fantastic congressman, and he won a majority of the vote because of the work he did. Well, the population centers in the district here, also he did well in New Bedford at that at that time, all of New Bedford was in the district, and that was a big population center. And Barney has always been really strong for the fishing industry. And so there were other parts of the district. It wasn't just Newton and Brookline that won it for him. It was that he got support from across the district, a majority of support, and there were some other cities as well where he did well that carried him across. But there's no doubt that Newton and Brookline are big population centers, and why I love living here, because they're also really strong. There's a lot of Democratic voters here as well.
Right. So how much of an impact can Newton and Brookline have, along with the rest of the district, for Shawn Bellet? Does he have a chance to win strongly, or a chance to win opposite the power, I guess, of the Kennedy name and Joe Kennedy as a candidate for however you define that power?
Yes, the answer to all of your questions is yes. The Newton and Brookline, obviously they're Democratic strongholds, and the turnout rate will be astronomical here. So we expect that the turnout rate will be very high, and they will go for Kennedy as they will for Brown and as they will for Obama. We expect that. However, bear in mind that one of the main reasons why Barney Frank chose to get out of the race at this time, he claimed that he was going to, that this was going to be his last term anyway, was because it was redistricted to places like Rentham and Attleboro, which are Republican strongholds, and he lost New Bedford. Now, what that meant was that he would have had to work very hard to win over those votes in those very Republican districts. And he may or may not have won. So he didn't want to work very hard, and he wanted to retire anyway, so 2 years ahead of time is not a big deal for him. Okay, so be it. Now we have the Kennedy, Joe the Younger running. And part of the problem with, part of the situation with what we see as is happening is that, yes, Kennedy is clearly running on his name. And yes, the premise is that a Kennedy has never lost an election in Massachusetts, but there's always a first time.
It's a fairly strong premise, though.
What?
Well, I mean, if a Kennedy has never lost an election, I guess. I mean, finish what you
well,
were.
there's
what
always
you
what
were
I'm saying
say,
is that there's always a first time, and the precedent that I'm getting at was that a Republican can win in this state, in this district, and the precedent was established by Scott Brown 2 years ago when he came right from behind and defeated the Democratic establishment. Now he can defeat Kennedy the Younger, or Joe Kennedy, or however you want to describe him. He can defeat him based on a grassroots movement of Republicans, independents, and many Democrats who will look at Joe Kennedy Jr., Joe Kennedy III, and say, why is this young man running for this position at this time? I'll give you a quick example. He's from Cambridge, which meant he lived there about a year ago. He lived in his mother's house, as I recall. He's been a state prosecutor for what? Assistant prosecutor for 2 years. While he was in Cambridge, he was obviously outside of the district, of this congressional district. There was a seat that did open up, a state Senate seat by, I believe it was Susan Fargo retired. That would have been something interesting, something appropriate for him to run for at that time. He chose not to. He chose not to follow the example of his cousin Patrick, who did run for a state rep seat in Rhode Island some years ago, and then catapulted eventually to the congressional seat.
So does that mean he's not qualified because he was from outside? I'm trying to get something specific out of
He's not qualified on a number of reasons. Number one, his career or lack thereof disqualifies him from running, because he was in the Peace Corps for a few years. Whoop-de-doo. He was a law student until recently, and then he was an assistant prosecutor in Middlesex County, and I believe on Cape Cod for a time being. All right, that's a minimal work record to run.
Do you agree, first of all, with anything that Tom just said, and then we can go from there?
Well, no. I mean, obviously not. We'd be surprised if we both shared the same viewpoints. I think we both like to live in Newton, though. It's a great place. This is the Republicans' point of view, which basically is completely issues-free, is trying to caricature this individual who is a very accomplished man, who is extremely accessible, who is very down-to-earth, who has been really open in all parts of the district during his campaign. And certainly he can't, no one can ignore the fact that he's a Kennedy, certainly looks very much like one, but he's running on the issues. And that, to me, is what's most important. And when I think about the Kennedy name as a Democrat, I think about a family that has just done incredible things for our country. And that name is one that I would love to see in the Congress, because if that legacy is carried forward, which Joe Kennedy will do, I'm sure, then working families will have somebody in Congress that'll fight for them, that minorities and women and gay people will have somebody there that's going to fight for them, for people who are poor through no fault of their own, who are struggling from an economic standpoint. They'll have somebody there for them. That's what Joe Kennedy is running for, and that's what this election's all about. And that's why he's going to be a really strong contender this fall, and why he's going to win, and why he has an incredible amount of support. I think he's very well qualified as well, and I think that Tom, tries to paint a caricature of a candidate, doesn't talk at all about the issues that are at stake here, which are really important.
How does the Democratic Party in Newton and the Republican Party in Newton feel about getting together in some way, shape, or form to reach those people who don't feel as though they want to latch themselves to one party or the other because they're simply sick of the arguing?
This is a good point. Maybe this is something both Tom and I would agree on. It's something that comes up a lot with partisan politics, being a Democratic Party leader. People, independents, basically say, I was out canvassing this week, and I'm sick of the fighting on both sides. All you do is throw mud at each other and so on. And, what I would say to the independent voter is don't be frustrated by that, because there are people who disagree about the direction this country should take, and they're discussing it, and that's what it's about. And sometimes the TV ads can definitely get a little annoying because they're can be misleading on both sides for sure. But to think about the issues that we're talking about and how it applies to you. So the way we would do that in the Democratic Party is to go and talk with these people individually. So I said that I was out canvassing this past weekend, and many, many Democrats were. We go to their house and we try to talk to them in person about why our candidates will improve their lives and make the place that they live better and their future better for their kids and their families. And that's really what we would be focused on.
Well, I think that you saw in the debates, and it's well known that Scott Brown is very centrist. He is an independent thinker. Many of his votes have crossed party lines, and he does not go lock and step with the Republican leadership. And Scott Brown is a lot more liberal than I am. I mean, he's not of my conservative brand of politics, and I have disagreements with him on several issues. However, I am supporting him, and I have a trunk full of his signs for anyone who wants them. And I would also urge Democrats to cross party lines. Democrats for Brown. It's not impossible that you can't cross party lines. But Scott Brown is really on the mold of the Bill Welds, the Ed Brooks, and other senators and governors who have come before him, who are really of the, shall we say, the Daniel Patrick Moynihan mold, in that they were very liberal Republicans, and that's essentially who gets elected in the state. You're not going to have George Bush type of Republicans. You're going to have the Scott Brown types. Now, and so Scott Brown is somebody who will not go lockstep with the party, much to my dismay. So he will cross party lines continuously. So that's why he's more of a centrist. He's more of, if there was such a thing as an independent party, then he would be it. And that's why he is ideal for this position, because if you look at somebody like Elizabeth Warren is very far to the left. She's very far to the left. Scott Brown is in the center, and there's no one far to the right, no libertarian, I believe, who's running that.
Do you mean Elizabeth Warren is far to the left compared to Scott Brown, or compared to what?
On the political spectrum.
Okay.
On the political spectrum, not compared to Scott Brown. She's, no, compared to me, she's very far to the left. Compared to a mainstream Republican, compared to a Paul Ryan, she's very far to the left. So you have a Scott Brown who really can cross party lines, and who has crossed party lines, to work with both aisles, and who can reach the citizens based on who he is and what he represents. I'll give you a quick example. Brian Kamika, who as you know is probably the most right-wing guy in the city of Newton, certainly more right-wing than me, confronted him on some issues that he didn't like at Johnny's Delicatessen. And Scott Brown just told him, Mr. Kamika, I respectfully disagree. I'm not going to budge on this issue, and so on and so forth. And Brian was shocked, but so be it. That's who Scott Brown is.
Where do you put Scott Brown on the political spectrum? I'm
glad you raised this question. I'm always ready to jump out of my seat to talk about this. That was an excellent recounting of the myth of the independent Senator Scott Brown, that he is a person who crosses party lines. In the debate with Elizabeth Warren, he recently said that he was about 50-50 with the Democrats and the Republicans, and that's just a lie. I'm sorry. Democrats and Republicans get frustrated if the media doesn't call something a lie when it is. That is a lie. He's made a couple of good votes. when when he's sure that his vote isn't going to change the outcome in the Senate. He's cast it because he's a politician and he knows that he had an election coming up. But he's somebody that's consistently supported the Republican Party and the Republican majority, Mitch McConnell. And to me, we got a slip. We got a little moment also recently when he identified his favorite Chief Justice as Antonin Scalia, who might be yours too, Tom. This is one of the most right-wing justices that's been on the court in modern history. He's a man who basically believes that women have absolutely no right to determine their own health care, that the Bush v. Gore decision, there's no states' rights when it comes to elections. So a person who's really a radical, and to Brown, that's his model justice.
But again, Scott Brown is somebody who maybe in a different state would be, in a state like Utah, probably wouldn't get elected because he would be considered to be too liberal. But in this state, he can be elected because he is more of a centrist liberal Republican. He would be, if he were in my city committee, he would be on the liberals, on the liberal spectrum. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because in this state, he can be elected based on that premise. Now, also, the problem with the Democrats is it's not so much their problem, it's just a sting of reality in that they cannot make the case to vote against Scott Brown, to kick Scott Brown out of office, because there is no case to be made. Because Scott Brown has been such a centrist, because Scott Brown has certainly alienated those on the far right, those of us who are very conservative like myself, they have not made the case because there isn't a case to be made, and that's why I think that the average voter is going to vote for him, and I think that that's a race that will be won by Scott Brown without question. That doesn't mean we're not going to work hard for him, we are, but it will be won by Scott Brown.
Do you think Scott Brown has a chance to win in Newton?
No, because the Democrats will come out in force, but it will be close. And that's okay. We don't expect him to win in Newton. We don't expect any Republican to win in Newton. That's the reality of the situation. This is not the 1950s when you had Christian Herter as the governor of the state, no, and the Saltonstalls. That's okay.
So on the topic of Scott Brown, the Democrats making the case, Elizabeth Warren focuses on Scott Brown's votes. And to me, actually, for any independent that gets frustrated by the back and forth and the talk and the spin and so on, the best way to evaluate a political leader is to just look at what have they done in the past. Because you can get a sense of past performance does, to a degree, indicate future performance. And Scott Brown's votes have been wildly out of touch with Massachusetts families, and they are conservative. He's voted to make college more expensive. He's voted to limit women's health care choices. He's supported the ending of Medicare and Medicaid, which are two programs that are incredibly important to low-income and senior people to get health care. The list goes on and on. We have a great compilation on the Newton Dems website, in fact. But the votes that he's taken are conservative votes. And there might be, as I said, a couple here and there where he's stepped over the Democrats so that he's got a talking point during campaign season. But he's not with us. He's not on our team. He's someone that's been consistently a really conservative senator. And I think maybe he would have a chance in Utah, actually. And
No,
he can give it a shot if he
actually,
wants
to. Shawn said he's not with us, and he shouldn't be with them. And I understand that. He's not a Democrat. He is in the fold, he is in the tent that is the Republican Party, and we're going to support him as such.
There's a state rep race in Newton that is contested, and I think it's important that we talk about that and give that some play as well. We have Alderman Greer Tan Swiston, who's been there for a couple of terms, 3 terms possibly, on the Board of Aldermen, I believe. And she's the Republican. She, as far as I know, actually, she may be the only Republican on the Board of Aldermen at this time, at least that I can think of. Greer is running for state rep opposite Representative Kay Kahn.
I don't think it's going to be too competitive because Kay Kahn is a state representative that has really worked hard and represented her constituents effectively in the State House. She's been a leader on a lot of issues, and she has a lot of local support. Her campaign is going really strong, and I think that it'll be pretty lopsided, the results. She's doing the right thing, just like all the Democrats in Massachusetts. She's running a strong campaign. She's not messing around. She's doing a really great job. She's got a good team working for her, and I know she'll do really well in November, and I'm excited to have her continue on in the State House.
One thing that's always been lacking in Newton, and I keep hearing the term diversity, but what's always been lacking is political diversity, and there is one elected Republican in the whole city, not just among the 24 aldermen, but also among the other elected positions, which would take us above 30 if you include the state reps, and that is Greer Tan Swiston. Now, Greer was elected not through Republicans, because there aren't enough Republicans to elect her citywide, to her citywide aldermanic seat. Greer was elected by a cross-section of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, just people from all walks of life, who elected her to serve as on the Board of Aldermen. And she has served in that position very well, and she has the esteem and the respect of her colleagues. Now, obviously, they're not going to come out and campaign for her because they're Democrats and they're part of the Democratic establishment, and I understand that. But Greer is very much in the Scott Brown mold in that she's very. I like her a great deal, as I do other politicians, some politicians in the city. But I do like Greer, and I do agree with her on some things. I disagree with her on other things. But she's a very independent voter, or rather independent alderman, and she's an independent thinker. And she's maybe a little bit too liberal for my liking because, as you know, I'm more lock and step with the Romney, George Bush wing of the party.
That does seem to be a reoccurring theme, by the way.
And that's okay. And that's okay. But and Greer is running a campaign on her own with her people on the north side of the town, and she's been getting out there. She's been meeting the people, meeting the public. And Greer realizes that she's been on the Board of Aldermen for several years, and it's time to either move up or move on. And the logical position to move up to would be the state rep. Now, Kay Kahn has been there. It's actually been 16 to 18 years, I believe. That's a very long time. Now, when John Adams created the state constitution over 200 years ago, he did not intend for people to be in state legislature positions for just a long time. Kay Kahn has been in that position, and she doesn't seem to be moving out, and she won't move out. Now, I've always said that some of these state legislatures, especially from Newton, should have run for the congressional for Barney Franksy. Kay Kahn is running in the wrong race. She should have run for that. She would have been at least qualified to run for that rather than the current individual, Mr. Kennedy, who's running. But that's obviously not happening. So Kay has been there for a very long time, and I don't believe that she has actually been as responsive as Shawn has said towards her constituents. For example, you see the barriers on the highway on Route 128 and the Mass Turnpike. Now, it took a very long time to get those in, and it wasn't because of her. When I wrote for the Newton Tab some years ago, I stressed that she has been ineffective in getting those barriers in. Only when she had to be dragged kicking and screaming did she finally come on board and the barriers were put in. That's a local issue. Another thing is, we have 2 interstate highways, 2 major railways going through Newton, and she's not on the Transportation Committee. Why? She's on the Mental Health Committee. Okay, that's very nice. I'm sure people have these issues in Newton that would be akin to her running such a committee. However, she's not on the committees that matter, and the Transportation Committee is something that matters. Now, the argument has been presented that because there are so many Democrats there that she's not a ranking Democrat in the state legislature. Okay, so that's another reason why we need a Republican of Greer, like Greer Swiston, in the state legislature, for the simple reason that with so few, and bear with me with the logic here, with so few Republicans in the state legislature, the House Minority Leader can at least pick and choose where to put these people in various committees. And what we need is somebody like Greer on the Transportation Committee to deal with these issues, on Riverside, with the highways, with the exits, et cetera, et cetera. Not somebody who's so focused on mental health issues as Kay Kahn has been.
I can kind of speak to that. I think what Tom's saying is kind of like you're cooking some stew, and what he's saying is you've got a pot with all carrots in it, and you need to add in some onions or something like that.
That's the first time I've heard it put that way.
It's not like, people talk about partisan politics like it's a recipe where you need a little bit of Republican, a little dash of Democratic legislators, and that's the perfect mix. And I think that's not the case. Tom had an opportunity to make the case for Greer on an issue standpoint. What does she want to do while she's there? And what we heard is that Kay's been there a long time. She represents psychiatry, which actually Newton has the highest percentage of psychiatrists and doctors living in Newton than the entire state. So, and then there's a lot of people that are impacted by mental health issues everywhere. So it does make a lot of sense for her to be on that issue. But you don't hear about why we should elect Greer. What you hear about is you need to sprinkle a little bit of Greer in because she's a Republican, because Kay's been there a long time, and so on. And Kay's been a really great legislator, and she has made a lot of difference for families in Massachusetts during her tenure in the State House, and she'll continue to do that. And so I kind of disagree. I hope my analogy wasn't too corny, but
it was.
I hear that.
It was still pretty good.
But the other thing I'd like to mention is, again, barring a cliche from the Democrats, from the liberals, is they keep talking about diversity. And I'm not saying we should vote for Greer because she would be the first Asian woman in the state legislature, but that counts for something. And we have an Asian population that is creeping up to 14 and 15%, and it's going not just in Newton, but across the state. And you asked me what are some of Greer's positions, and Greer has many positions. You can go to her website, you can go to whatever you want to see, and certainly not on the Republican website because we're not running her campaign. She's running an independent campaign. But again, I will stress that Greer is a candidate who has been a not so much who has been, shall we say, more than Scott Brown in reaching across the line, across the aisle to Democrats, to independents, to get elected, and to reach out to the community.
Thank you both for coming in today. Shawn Fitzgibbons, co-chair of the Democratic City Committee in Newton, and Tom Mountain, who's the chair of the Republican City Committee in Newton. Thanks for coming into Newton Newsmakers. The election's November 6th, and we'll be back to wrap up Newton Newsmakers right after this.
The Angels from the Attic are helping Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation. Let's take a look.
There's lots to do.
We made signs, a stand, and now lemonade.
We're open for business.
Help others.
Get your lemonade.
We sold every drop.
To find out more, please get your parents' permission and visit our website.
And thank you.
Before we go, I just want to take a moment to thank the thousands of people who supported me in my recent campaign for Governor's Council. I'm still in the process of writing some personal thank you notes, so bear with me on that, please. Even though we didn't win the primary, I'm very proud of the effort, and I'm grateful for the encouragement I received throughout the 32 communities in the district. I received about 25% of the vote. The other challenger, Mr. Margolis, outspent us by about 5 or 6 times, and he received about 10% more votes. He and I essentially split the 60% of voters who were open to a change. So the result, the 14-year incumbent, Ms. Devaney, won the primary with 40%. Would things have been different in a one-to-one contest? Well, I believe so. But I walk away head held high and successful in helping increase the awareness of the importance of the office of Governor's Council and the need to make positive change. There's clearly more work to be done, and I look forward to continuing to contribute in the future. I want to say thank you also for watching this edition of Newton Newsmakers. If you missed any part of the program, just go to newtonnewsmakers.org. You can see it online, on demand, 24/7, and also sign up for our monthly email update. It's free. If you have an idea or a topic you'd like to see us discussed on the program, you can let us know. That's it for this edition of Newton Newsmakers. I'm Charlie Shapiro. We'll see you next time, and remember, vote on November 6th. Thanks for watching.
Newton Newsmakers is made possible through the volunteer production efforts of the employees of mass media and big city publishing, and through the support of Newton residents like you.